One of President Trump's longtime advisors arrested by the FBI.
Fox 5 legal analyst Wendy joining us now, breaking down what we know about the case against Roger Stone. Wendy, good morning.
Good morning.
Boy, overnight, showing up at the house with vests and the police and everything else. Explain, first of all, the relationship between Roger Stone and the president.
Well, Roger Stone has been described as a close associate, as an advisor, somebody who was briefly employed actually as part of the campaign. He's been around politics forever, for 30 years, and dating back to Watergate and Richard Nixon. A little bit of Roger Stone trivia. Apparently he has a tattoo of Richard Nixon on his back. I've seen a picture of it on the internet. You probably didn't need to know that, but in any event, a colorful character to say the least.
Yeah.
Now, but the question here is the indictment. What does that have to do with the president? The indictment basically is for just a small amount of counts. But the problem is the indictment speaks of so many other facts and circumstances that weren't charged that has everybody talking about where do we go from here?
Right.
And why is the indictment so long given that he's only charged with 7 counts?
You talk about these 7 different charges. They're ranging from making false statements to obstruction. What do we know about these accusations?
Shali, we have a 24-page indictment. What we know about Mueller's office is he doesn't leak, he speaks through court filings, not through press conferences. And when you read the court filing, we call these speaking indictments because there's so many things that are in here that don't yet appear in formal charges. Now, why is the question? Is it because they expect Roger Stone to cooperate in return for not being charged with more crimes that potentially they could charge him with? Or is it to paint the picture and tell the story that Mueller's office cannot, because they don't go on the courthouse stairs and give press conferences as all the lawyers and everybody else involved in the process does?
Which I think is a very smart decision on Mueller's part.
Absolutely.
Give us a little perspective. Rank this arrest with everything else we've seen so far in this investigation.
It's similar in the sense that it deals with lying. That has really been a theme that's permeated many of...
But is this just another person accused of lying, or is this
it's
more
somebody
important?
it's somebody that is close to the president, which takes them sort of out of the orbit of some of the other people that have been indicted.
Sure.
But it's still, he's not charged with colluding with the Russian government. He's not charged with conspiring with the Russian government. And let me tell you what is unique about Roger Stone. He has long felt the walls closing in and actually been saying publicly, I expect to be indicted. Can you imagine Raul saying, hey, I expect to be arrested? Right, I'm waiting for it. And so in that sense, he was almost hiding in plain sight for the last year, expecting this day to come, and this morning it did.
The charges mention Organization 1.
That's right.
Even saying the head of that group is located in Ecuador's embassy in London. So we've been mentioning WikiLeaks in the middle of all this. How does this play into that?
Well, there's nobody else that could be, basically.
Julian Assange
we've all seen Assange.
On,
he's the only person I know holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in London that's connected to everything that's gone on.
Right.
But what do we know? What was his real connection with WikiLeaks? And if he does have a connection, as he claims he does, and as the indictment says he does, what does that have to do with the White House? Now, we do have information in the indictment that a high-level official was directing the conduct, that they were all in contact. But that's not to say it was either the president or anybody in his immediate circle. It could be somebody that wanted to get him elected. It is those vagaries that have everybody talking this morning about what does it mean, and the way it was written is intentionally vague. It has to be. They can't lay all their cards on the table. It's too early. Just an indictment.
It's almost like Mueller without those news conferences and just doing it through court filing. It's like he's building up this momentum for this, like it's like watching a movie and you're waiting for the end of for the final scene of this movie to play out and see what happens. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned, how does this affect the president, this and that. Well, Sarah Sanders came out this morning, and in her word, it was we were all watching in awe of her saying the words that this has nothing to do with Trump, that this has nothing to do with the building behind the White House. How does the press secretary for the president of the United States go on TV and say that when all of this is somehow related at the very least?
Because she's not up to speed yet. Sometimes I talk about reading people, impression management on your show. You could see in her face this morning that she'd been caught off guard and she'd not read enough of the indictment. And even if she had, she's not a lawyer. She actually said that on TV this morning, that she didn't know enough of the background facts and circumstances to be able to provide the information we want from her. And that just permeated everything she said this morning. I wouldn't be surprised if after she's briefed, after she's up to speed, she'll be able to provide a more complete defense, let's call it that, of the president and the White House when it comes to being involved in what it says in this indictment.
So what does this all mean? you want to wrap this up and put a little bow on it today.
We'd love to do that.
Wouldn't we all love to, but we're still waiting. This is going to be a while still, I think.
Well, what this means, Charlie and Raul, is they've indicted somebody that's closer to the president in terms of not only the time of the campaign, but really as a longtime confidant and advisor than some of the previous indictments. So what this does, it just brings them one step closer to making the argument that the president was involved in this. But I got to tell you, legally, it doesn't get them there yet. And there's still that gap that shows the president knew or was involved in what was going on in this indictment. That's the missing link, as we say. We're still waiting.
There's a lot of lying going around. Is
That's
essentially
for
what we're
sure.
learning.
That's for sure.
But then you have to ask the follow-up to that. If there's so much lying that's been proven, people are lying, why are they lying, and what is the motivation behind the lie?
And doesn't that color their testimony and their credibility as a witness? That's the problem. It's a double-edged sword to charge somebody with lying.
So
and
maybe
then say we want them to cooperate.
So this isn't really a movie. This is more like a Netflix short series that
Well, you know,
lasts about...
Roger Stone is a Netflix short series.
There you
Yeah,
go.
he's got his own documentary. So, I mean,
Hey,
if you want to call it that, let's put documentary in air quotes.
Like one of those
Very entertaining.
10-part things that when you get to the 10th, oh, you know what? It was so popular, we're going to do another season. And
Another 10.
Wendy Patrick, thank you.
Thank you.
That was
Always
a lot to go
pleasure.
through this morning. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.